I'm going to record this video, kind of a short video on how you can use inferred matching. And for my example, I'm going to use MyHeritage Clustering Tool, but this process is possible to do with other tools and other shared matching or in common with. So I'm going to first demonstrate it with MyHeritage, and then later I'm going to post more videos with different tools and how to do this. So what does it mean to infer matches? This is kind of a hot topic. I know that Johnny Pearl on DNA Painter has a new inferred matching tool. Blaine Bettinger's done at least one talk that I know of on inferred matching. But this is kind of a hot topic that's come up in the last year or so. And so we're going to talk about what it means to infer matches and how that might help you with your brick walls. So full siblings, when we think about full siblings, we think that each of us are approximately 50% mom, 50% dad, and approximately 25% of each grandparent. But you know, with the shared centimorgan project, you can see that the approximate 25% for each grandparent can vary quite a bit. So you don't always share 25% with each grandparent. Each sibling can get a different mixture of mom and dad. Obviously, we're not talking about identical twins or triplets. What we're talking about are biological siblings or fraternal twins. And each of us get a different mix of mom and dad. There's some overlap, of course, and sometimes a lot of overlap, but we each get a different mixture. And we can each get different mixtures of the four grandparents based on what we inherit from our parents. Each siblings can have differences in their match list. That's what we're going to capitalize on today. That if you have full siblings of the same two parents, that each sibling can have differences in their match list that we can infer match us in our match list. Siblings do have DNA overlap, so sometimes you won't get more matches from a sibling, but sometimes you will. So I'm going to show you a few things about that to kind of get your head wrapped around the concept. So I have a match on my DNA list, and I've labeled her as KA. Those are her initials. And she's a predicted second to third cousin. And when I look at the shared match tab, what I see is that she matches my dad, John. She matches my children. And then she also matches my full siblings, Jody and Todd. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my shared matches with KA and compare those to my sister's matches with KA and my brother's matches with KA. And then I'm going to compile all of those together in one big group. That's what inferred matching means. Now, this is Ancestry's site, and we're not going to do our entire process through Ancestry, but in order to understand the different ways you can approach this, I'm going to start with a little example from Ancestry and then move to MyHeritage's clustering tool. So how does this help you? Your siblings can have DNA that matches to different cousins than you do, but because you're of the same parents, you can assume that their matches are your matches. Now remember, they have to be full siblings, or you have to take into account other things. And so if I choose a match to me, I chose KA, and I look at shared matches, and then I choose a match to my sister with KA and do shared matches, and I choose a match to my brother with KA and choose shared matches, and so on if you have more siblings, then what you can do is compile a list of the people who match one of you, two of you, or three of you. And those are all inferred matches of you, even if you do not share DNA and have a shared match. So I've listed a couple of resources here from Johnny Pearl's blog at DNA Painter, how to work with inferred matches and then how to use it in the chromosome browser there. So this shows you just on a spreadsheet what I compiled for my matches with KA. So if you look at the first column, that's the category of matching. So parent, child, full sibling, first, second, third, fourth cousins. I rarely go beyond thirds or fourth cousins when I'm working with matches. But when I'm doing inferred matching, sometimes I include the fourths. So I have the ancestry match in column B, and then in column C are all the matches that I share with KA. Those are the names that come from, or the usernames that come from Ancestry's tool and the shared matching. So KA and I both match John and Kylie and Casey and Corey and so on. So that first column C is my matches with KA. I did the same process of looking at shared matches between my sister Jody and KA, and her list is in column D. And what you notice is there are a few that are missing from my list. So I match TB and CS if you look kind of in the middle, and she does not. But she has another whole section of matches kind of in green that I don't match. So I can infer that her matches with KA are also mine. Then if you look at column E, that's my brother Todd and his shared matches with KA. And you notice there are some gaps there where he does not match KA in the same location as my brother and sister. I'm sorry, my sister and I. But if you go down to the green, he has some shared matching between my sister that I don't have. And then he has in blue at the bottom matches that neither of the two of us have. So we can infer that the yellow, the green, and the blue are all matches that we all share with KA. So that's a really powerful way to expand what full siblings share and how you can infer each other's matches. So because full siblings share the same parents and grandparents and so on, these matches to my siblings are assumed matches to our common ancestors. So this is a really powerful tool. We're going to look at MyHeritage for shared matching and clustering. And so I'm going to give you the steps here so that you can pause the video and do a little work and come back. So if you have a DNA kit at MyHeritage and you have access to the clustering tool, this is a great way to do this process a little bit faster. Now, some people have uploaded their raw DNA to MyHeritage, or maybe they haven't paid to access all the tools. So you're going to have to check your individual account to see if you have access to MyHeritage's tools. So what you want to do is you want to choose 2 or 3 siblings. Now remember, it doesn't have to be your siblings. It can be a group. It can be a group of people, a group of siblings on a cousin brick wall. It can be a group of siblings that are your second cousins. It doesn't have to be your siblings, just a group of siblings. And we're going to take the simplest case of using inferred matching by doing full siblings of the same parents. There are lots of other options, and you can read more about that. But to start with full siblings of the same parents. So what you want to do is export the shared DNA segment information for all your matches and download your auto clustering spreadsheets. So in the cluster tool, there are instructions of how to do that. But let's look at what's involved at that. So I'm going to go to MyHeritage to my DNA match list. You can see that's highlighted in pink. And then this screen appears, and you're going to, let me back that up a minute. Sorry. I want you to be able to see this slide right here. So there at the top of the list is export entire DNA match list. Below that is export shared DNA segment info for all DNA matches. So I usually export both of those, but then I go to the clustering tools and use the clustering tools also. So if you don't have access to clustering tools, you can still do inferred matching by exporting the DNA shared segment information for your matches. So if you and a set of siblings are in MyHeritage, or if a set of siblings, full siblings of the same parents, are in MyHeritage, you can do this process for each of those siblings. So in the tools, there is a tool called auto clustering. And again, it depends on your level of membership and that sort of thing, whether you can access this. MyHeritage will email you your zip files when you run the auto clustering tool. So you're going to run an auto clustering tool on you, on sibling 1, sibling 2, and so on. So what happens is the Excel sheet, the sheets will download as CSV files, and you want to change them to Excel files. So you notice the top one here, Kelly Bergheimer DNA matches shared segments. It gives the date, and then below that it says CSV, which is a comma separated value chart. And you don't want CSV because, well, you can use CSV, but if you make any changes to it, it won't save the changes. So the first thing I always do is I save it to Excel, whatever version of Excel that you happen to have. And then what I do is I widen the columns because some of the information isn't very visible. It kind of compacts all the columns. So I widen the columns so I can actually read it. So the way you can do that is you can click on the letter A or B or C, and then you can drag. So you kind of hover there until you can drag it and make it wider. Again, this will only work on Excel, not on comma separated value. As soon as you close and reopen comma separated value, all of it's gone again. So you want to definitely widen the columns to expand the start and end positions. So most of the time when I've downloaded this, it's been column E and F. Do you see where it says end location in column F? And it has scientific notation there. It's 2.49 times 10 to the 8th power. You want to expand that column so that it looks more like what's on the right. 249179856. So you want to expand that number so that you can see the end positions and not do approximate scientific notation. Most of you probably don't remember that from school anyway. So I always add borders to the cells. So there, I've circled on here where you can add borders. If you click in the upper right corner where there's that half triangle, you can highlight the entire cell and add borders to the entire thing. I do that just for my own vision so that I can kind of follow along line by line across the spreadsheet. So I make a folder for these inferred matches. So after I've converted all the CSV files to Excel, then I move the zip files and the CSV files to a folder. And that's so that I avoid mixing them up. And then I move the auto clustering files to a folder for later and make sure that those are appropriately named. So I have already started a folder for the inferred matches to me at MyHeritage using my siblings. So I'm going to show you how to build one spreadsheet of the siblings information. I'm just going to get a little bit into it so that you can try this at home. Copy each file so that you have an original. So that's kind of a basic Excel thing. I know that you can hit the back button and eventually get back to where you were, but I usually copy an original and file it in a subfolder so that I'm not accidentally making one change to one version and another change to another version. Now I work in publishing, and so we're really careful about our versioning issues. So I always have a folder for original files, and then the ones that I'm manipulating are out inside the subfolders. So I move those copies to a folder so that I always have those. And I'm going to start with the auto clustering sheet, and you either choose one sibling or yourself, and this is the master sheet. So I rename it as master sheet so that I never get confused that everything I'm adding is going into the master sheet, because ultimately, as many siblings as you're adding, you're going to start adding more and more and more people to the master sheet. So the master sheet might be you with your match list, your shared matches, but it's going to also include your siblings with their shared matches. So I add a column A on the left by right-clicking the A and choosing Insert. So I do that because I want to note whose test it is. So at each stage, we're going to archive the documents in case we make a mistake. And once we alter the document, it won't match the auto cluster HTML file. So we want to keep that original file separate. But that column A, I'm going to use for a very particular reason. I'm going to make that my column for test taker. So you see on the left, column A, I've put the heading in for test taker. All the rest of it is the same, but I have listed Kelly, 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 Kelly. And this is my clustering sheet that I have for my shared matches. So I insert the name of the tester for each spreadsheet. So right now I have a spreadsheet for Kelly, and then I have a spreadsheet for my brother Todd, and I have a spreadsheet for my sister Jody. Eventually, I'm going to have one master spreadsheet. And I've given you a tip here that you can highlight the cells and choose fill over on the right side and click on that arrow to do fill down. And so it'll fill it in for you. You don't have to type Kelly, Kelly, Kelly. Notice that the column H has which cluster those people belong to. Now, if you're not familiar with MyHeritage Clustering Tool, I do have a recorded video on YouTube that will give you all the basics of the MyHeritage Clustering Tool. And so at this point, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, you might want to go back and watch that and then come back to this. But Kelly's cluster one, my cluster one, could be and is likely different than Jody's or Todd's. So when you're thinking about clusters, cluster one is a set of people who all share matches in common. We're all matched together, and my cluster one might be different than Jody's cluster one or Todd's cluster one. For your master spreadsheet, there's a couple of other tips here. And again, if you're not that familiar with Excel, I always freeze the top row so that no matter how far down I scroll, I can still see all the headings. So what you want to do is click on the row itself on the far, far, far left. And then you want to go to the upper right where it says freeze panes, and it'll give you the option to freeze the top row. And that's really helpful for me to not get lost within the spreadsheet. All the way at the bottom, there's you might see a note that says the following matches have been removed, blah blah. The following 53 matches met the inclusion parameters, what were placed in a cluster, blah blah. You might see those two kind of boilerplate things with a lot of your matches information. For now, I keep that there, but I'm not going to use that. Those are kind of the oddball matches, and I don't do anything with those right now. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to a sibling and you're going to repeat the process. You're going to add that sibling's name to column A. Then you're going to look at the clusters 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Then you're going to go to sibling number 2, repeat that again, add a column A, add their name, so that you've built 3 files. I've got a Kelly file, a Jody file, a Todd file. And I archive that as altered before I cut and paste. So at each step, I'm archiving each stage. That way, if I make a mistake, I can always go back to that archived file. and then I save that in my folder. So you can see that I have a list of files that's altered before cut and paste, and I move them to that folder. Now, again, this is my organization. It might not fit your brain or the way you do things, but I rename those spreadsheets as cut paste and I move them. It's helpful to me to be able to identify at which stage I did what in case I make a mistake and I need to go back. So in my master spreadsheet, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a blank row to separate each cluster. So if you look in column H, do you see where it has cluster 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and so on? I'm going to add a row between where the 1 stops and the 2 starts. When MyHeritage spits out that cluster report, it does not have any spaces added. And the reason why I'm adding a space is because I'm also going to eventually add this cluster that matches from my sister and the cluster that matches from my brother. And so I'm going to add a bunch of rows and squeeze those in there. Now remember, my cluster 1, my sisters and my brothers might be different. So I'm going to add a space there for now on my whole spreadsheet. So this is the master spreadsheet, mine. I'm adding a blank row to separate each cluster. So you can right click on the row number. So over there where it says, I believe it's 18, you can right click on that and then insert, and you can insert row below and it'll give you that blank row. I guess you want to use 17, sorry. You want to click on 17 and insert. So you can do row above, row below. And then you'll see that there's a whole row before cluster number 2 starts for me. So now we're going to look for matches that are in Kelly's list and Todd's list. So remember, you can search spreadsheets with Control F. You can use the command Control and the letter F, and that's a find tool. So I'm going to start with my match in cluster 1, and that's Angela. And what I'm going to do with Angela is I'm going to search my brother's spreadsheet for her and my sister's spreadsheet for her. So I'm going to look for Angela, and I find that Angela in my brother's list is in cluster 2. Do you see the cluster 2 down here at the bottom? So Angela's in my cluster 1, but in his cluster 2. She's in my sister's cluster 1. When I do Control F in my sister's spreadsheet, I find Angela in cluster 1 for my sister. So all of my brother's 2s are in the same group as my 1s. So Kelly's 1s and Todd's 2s go back to the same couple. So I'm going to add the matches from my brother to my spreadsheet. And when I do that, my master spreadsheet, when I do that, I cut the cells. I don't just copy and paste. I cut them so that they disappear from my brother's sheet. So remember when I said we're going to have a copy paste, we're going to have one file that we archive? This is why, because I'm going to cut them from my brother's sheet and add them to mine. If I just copy and paste, I don't necessarily know when I've taken all of my brothers and paired them with mine. So this set of my cluster 1, my brother's 2s, and my sister's 1s go back to the same ancestral couple. So I add those 19 matches of my sister to my master sheet by cutting them from my sister's. So make sure that you copy the row 1 for T and the row 1 for J, because it's different than the row 1 for Kelly. And you can clean up duplicates later. So you might be saying, well, between the 3 siblings, there are the same names that show up over and over. That's true. It could show up twice or 3 times. So I'm going to delete those duplicates later. Right now, I'm just going to do the cut, paste, and build the groups that are in common. So now I color all those rows the same color. So this is my Kelly's cluster 1, Todd's cluster 2, Jody's cluster 1. Choose a color for this group. And don't forget to repeatedly copy row 1 and row for Todd and row 1 for Jody. Remember, you're going to have many, many, many clusters. So you're going to need many, many, many colors. And it's okay to duplicate a color. I just don't duplicate a color really close to it. So if I have to reuse like orange, I'll reuse orange towards the bottom of the sheet just for visual. But these are all inferred matches of mine from my brother and my sister. So you're going to repeat this process for my other clusters. So in the master sheet, I'm going to go to my group 2. I'm going to go to my group 3. I'm going to do that same process of Control F and searching my brother and my sister's charts. And I'm going to pull them into the master sheet by cut and paste. And then I'm going to shade the group a different color until I get back to remove the duplicates and everything. Make sure you're saving often. And then if my brother has a cluster, when I get all done with the master list for mine, if my brother still has a remaining cluster that I don't have, I'm going to add that to the bottom of the master list. And anything that my brother and sister have that don't match, I'm going to add to the bottom of the list. If you have mom and or dad of these siblings, make sure that you copy your master spreadsheet and label it with a different file name. You want to layer in matches to mom and or matches to dad in the same way that you did for your siblings. So I've done this on my chart. Once I've figured out the sibling clusters, I layer in mom and dad so I can determine mom's side or dad's side for each group. Now, you may not have parents tested of the set of siblings you're working with, and that's okay too. You'll eventually figure it out. And remember that your mom and dad might have clusters that the 3 siblings don't, because mom and dad could have DNA that none of the 3 siblings inherited. So I only got half of my mom and half of my dad's DNA, not all of it. And there might be some DNA that none of my siblings and I inherited. But most of the clusters will match the 3 siblings. So what we're going to talk about at our meeting on Sunday is how you can use this particular concept to make a giant spreadsheet to give you clusters of ancestors to work on all together. It's a much larger picture than just your own shared match list if you can layer in the matches of your siblings or the matches of your parents. So get to work. See you soon.